From our studios in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip. I'm joined by my co-host Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. On Green Tag, we recap the top news from theme parks each week and try and explain why it matters to you or should matter to you. And this week, Scott, there might be a new third place challenger in the U.S. theme park world.
Yeah, this is big news. This is pretty exciting. And I will say, when we after you explain a little bit more, I'm not as surprised as I think some people are. But yeah, I'll let you because you're so very good at it. I'll let you sort of share with us the parameters, and then I'll yammer on for a while.
Oh, good.
Well, the normal way we do the show. Yeah.
Yes. Good. I'll need a coffee break when Scott's yammering, so that's perfect timing.
That's why I took a sip at the beginning of the show. So
great. Herschend. So for those of you that have not heard, Herschend announced a definitive agreement to acquire all of Palace Entertainment's U.S. entertainment properties. The Herschend, just so you know, Herschend operates Dollywood, Silver Dollar City, and Kentucky Kingdom, and they're going to add more than 20 amusement parks, water parks, and FEC with this acquisition. Herschend is committed to ensuring a smooth transition for everybody. And here's the thing, just a note here, this is coming right after the Six Flags nonsense merger thing going on there. And whereas Six Flags, I think dollar-wise, it's a larger merger, and of course that's a merger versus an acquisition, but that's much larger, and those are both public companies, so we have all sorts of information on Six Flags. With Herschend and Palace Entertainment, these are private companies, so we don't have as much, I guess, disclosures when it comes to financial stuff. So we don't have a number here, like a financial number that was released about the actual acquisition amount, but there's a lot of differences. I mean, while on its surface, I think this looks like very similar to what happened with Six Flags. There's a few differences beyond the fact that it's public versus private companies. But one is kind of what Herschend is saying immediately about it, which is that they're not going to change anything in the short term, which I think is a great idea, but also indicative of the difference here. Because when you have Six Flags, that's a public company, you have a lot of people, shareholders, the general public, the media, a lot of people who are scrutinizing it that are wanting to know what's going to happen. So I think they might need to be a little bit more aggressive versus in this one where Herschend can kind of take a more measured approach. So they said that no immediate changes are planned for the daily operations. And they listed in their press release, they even put out a list of things they're going to do in the coming months. And they're saying they're going to prioritize supporting the new employees with training, resources, and opportunities aligned with Herschend's people first culture. They're going to maintain continuity and guest experiences while exploring enhancements that align with Herschend's commitments to high quality entertainment. And they're going to proactively communicate with employees, guests, and local communities as the transition progresses. Just a few more details here. I think a lot of people are thinking, as we said at the top of the show, that this is going to be potentially them vying for who's going to be third place or fourth place, right? We got Disney, we got Universal, Six Flags, and now potentially Herschend being third or fourth place. Before the acquisition, Herschend was estimated to get about 15 million annual visitors. With the acquisition, people are estimating that's going to be at 20 million, which is really close to Six Flags when we reported on last time, which is Six Flags is like 21 million with all their parks, like more properties overall, but only 21 million. And this will get Herschend pretty close to that. In terms of numbers, the only thing I could really find here for you all is that Moody's reported in 2022 that Herschend's annual revenue was about 650 million. So keep in mind that was 2022, and they've been doing well. So it's definitely more than 650 million annual. However, the Palace Entertainment U.S. parks were also doing really well. And overall, the Palace Entertainment section under Parques Reunidos, which is the parent part of that, their cash flow was 224 million euros. Of course, they're a European company, which is part of the reason they wanted to divest of this, is that they wanted to kind of get rid of the U.S. portfolio and allow a U.S. operator to take over that. And that would free them up to invest in the European markets. But so if they're 220 million in 2024 total cash flow, and this part is about 30% of there, then you can kind of see, where that kind of, you can see the proportions of that roughly. A lot of people are estimating this deal is around 750 million to the $1 billion range, which would be, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times EBITDA based off their growth percentage. So that's a lot, though. I mean, so say that, let's just say Herschend paid potentially $1 billion for this, and their total operating revenue was maybe 750 or 800 at this point. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's perceivable. I mean, if all the properties are doing well and they have a plan to enhance items, then you could see this, really becoming a good investment for them. I don't think anyone thinks it's bad, but also we don't really know because they're private companies. So I think in many parts it's interesting. There are a few interesting things here. I want to talk about the programming, and I also want to talk about what this means for Europe. But first, Scott, tell me what you think of the overall plan.
So this makes so very, very much sense. Certainly for a couple of reasons. I think the reason it makes sense is because even though Parques Reunidos was the overall owner, from what I had garnered from friends and associates, the European side and the North American side, or the U.S. side, were run very, very differently, all kind of filtering up to a head point, but there was always a little bit of confusion and quirkiness. And I also think that this is, as you mentioned, this is a great opportunity for them to get some cash flow so that they can continue to invest in European properties, which, as we've talked about on the show, is becoming a new hotbed. With Universal opening there and Puy du Fou expanding and doing a new park, and so it makes all kinds of sense in that regard. It also makes sense that they're not planning to do any major sweeping changes, basically because both Herschend and Palace, to most guests, they have no idea who Herschend or Palace are, because they're all the parks. None of them have the Herschend name above the title or blatantly emblazoned around the title. The parks are all known as their independent parks, and that there's no need for either company to put their name on everything, because that's simply not their brand and not their approach for either Herschend or Palace. So I think that just makes a lot of sense. Unlike Six Flags, Six Flags has their name on everything, and when they went through their buying spree several years ago, quite a few years ago now, but when they went through their buying spree, they couldn't even, when the parks that they couldn't afford to bring up to Six Flags standards, they would say Geauga Lake, a Six Flags property, so they felt the need to get that Six Flags brand on there somewhere, even though it wasn't necessarily, they weren't confident enough to say it's a Six Flags park yet. So there's no need to. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I think that it just in true Herschend form, in their list of, in the coming months, how they're prioritizing the change and how they're prioritizing the acquisition, supporting the new employees with training, resources, and opportunities aligned with the Herschend's people first culture. This is what has made Herschend different from all the other theme parks. Everybody thinks that Disney has cornered the market on people first, but until you really start digging into what Herschend does and the various foundations that they have for their employees, and Herschend is they really practice what they preach here. They've always been very much a people first company, and so it makes total sense that is the top priority, as opposing to put the Herschend name on everything, because the Herschend name isn't on what they owned already.
Yes.
So there's that. I think that the idea of maintaining the high quality entertainment, that's kind of a duh. Nobody's going to say, and we're going to let everything slide and get really crappy. They're not going to do that. They're going to say they're going to maintain the top quality stuff. So that makes sense. I mean, you have to kind of say that. And I think the idea of keeping the focus on the local communities, because the vast majority of these are all legacy parks, really. I mean, they all started as small privately owned parks that were then bought up by Palace and now bought up by Herschend. So that's that's the DNA of the parks that are being added to their portfolio. It would make zero sense for them to all of a sudden say, okay, screw you locals, we're going to make this all about tourism. So it seems like a pretty wise acquisition to me. It seems like things are pretty much in line because, let's face it, Palace and Herschend, very similar. And again, not to say that Six Flags Valley Fair was not, or Cedar Fair was not, but because they too were very similar in their approaches. But these two just seem. I'm curious. I haven't talked to any of my friends who have worked for Palace yet about this, but I'm gonna guess that they're gonna feel pretty good about it. Because again, they're being purchased by a company that has always focused on the local, small, quote unquote independent parks, and been able to give them an improved buying power by being a larger company. And usually that is in the form of employee benefits, insurance, that kind of thing. So to me, this sounds like a really good acquisition. Just kind of knowing the personalities or the cultures of the two major holding companies. Now, whether they're going to really go into competition for Six Flags for third place, I don't know. And my guess is I think that's a nice to have. I don't think that's why they did this. That's just my gut feeling.
Well, I'm not sure about that last element there. I think that, as with all things, we talk about this pendulum all the time. We talk about the way market works and how everything works. And there's been this trend of bundling and unbundling, like unbundling, rebundling, unbundling, rebundling. It used to be we had cable, we had just a few channels. Then the democratization of media came with the internet, and everything got split up in tiny pieces. And now you see everything rebundling back up. And I think the core of that, or a piece of that, is because people don't like to have too many choices ultimately, right? we always talk about the three menu options.
Mm-hmm.
Give someone three options, right? And I think that's just natural in any market where you see the bundling and then rebundling. And I think that's what is happening in the theme park space in the US, at least, is this consolidation. And it just makes sense because effectively you have to become big enough to compete. And I think in some ways the Six Flags thing might be driving this need, because you just have to be big enough to compete. So I think I agree that it may not be, their number one deciding factor. It might be like a confluence of elements together.
Well,
where
it's like
we need to become big enough to compete. And also right now with the current situation in the DOJ and all that nonsense, we know that any mergers and acquisitions are not going to be stopped or really scrutinized. So it's a good opportunity timing wise with the government situation.
There's that, yeah.
And then also it's kind of where the trend is going, right? Like Disney's taking off, Universal is taking off with Epic, and then Six Flags is like, also just in terms of sheer property size, their reach is just enormous. Mm-hmm. And so, then when you got United Parks, so they're like, no, you're like, we got to be like, you got to get in there to compete, because, just like when we looked at the streaming wars, right? People are going to choose 3 to 4 options. I think the same, you can take that concept and extrapolate it out to the theme park thing, and you're going to choose like 3 or 4 options. I think being past number 4 would be a bad position to be in.
See, I would agree with you. I would agree with you if it became Herschend's Dutch Wonderland, or Herschendland Dutch Wonderland, or Dutch Wonderland, a Herschend park. They don't present themselves that way.
Well, we'll see. And actually, that's where I think that I actually think it's fascinating to look at the different approaches between Six Flags and Herschend. And I would say a lot of our complaints that we had with Six Flags' approach to the merger, actually Herschend is almost like doing kind of navigating around those things better, where they're communicating up front. They're not going to panic people by changing it. They're playing more regionality, whatnot. But what I would say is a lot of the things that Six Flags claims they're going to be able to do, like control costs, consolidate departments, and consolidate brand. I actually think Herschend is going to have a better chance of doing those things. So I think while they may not be banking on like the name of Herschend being at the parks, I do think they're going to actually benefit from some of the cost saving consolidation measures that Six Flags claimed, but we have not really.
Right.
But Six Flags is not fully realized.
But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is your 3 menu choice. Your 3-choice menu, because
I think
Herschend is not going to be Herschend is not going to be on the menu. Dollywood is going to be on the menu, and Dutch Wonderland is going to be on the menu.
Maybe they will for the locals. I think maybe that's the play. Is like the people in those regions will go. They'll travel for Disney.
Kennywood is not competing with a Universal or a Disney park.
Well, I would disagree with that. I do think that a lot of. I don't have the numbers for this. That would be an interesting thing for me to look up at some, a future venture. But I think the play might be if you have somebody in Pennsylvania, right? Now that person's top 3, like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, theirs will be like, go down to Universal for Halloween Horror Nights, or go down for, whatever thing Universal's doing because it's so close, or go to Disney. So those theme park fans are still going to travel because it's so close to Orlando, right? But then their
Orlando
third choice
and
will
Philly?
be
No. They're not good. That's not close. It's close compared to you. You're used to traveling all over the world. Most human beings who don't make the theme park industry their job, their business, that's a big investment, and they'll do it once every 5 years. I think that
so it's a 2-hour flight.
it's from Philly.
Yes.
Okay, I've flown to Philly. It's at least 2.5, usually 3. But and then you add in the hotel costs, and you add in and it's a 4-hour flight to California. So why aren't we competing with Disneyland? My point being is they're not going to say I'm going to put Kennywood up against Walt Disney World. They're not going to do it. Walt Disney World is in a different class completely. So it's not even competing. If they were looking at, I'm going to a Herschend park or a Six Flags park or a Disney or Universal park, there's your 3 menu. I think Disney and Universal are in a class unto themselves. They are a destination location. I think what's going to benefit them here is when now they're going to look at, I'm going to go to either Dollywood or Kennywood or Silver Dollar City or Kentucky Kingdom. Those are all in the Eastern Seaboard. Those are significantly closer.
Yeah.
And what's happening is by keeping the parks individual and unique from a guest standpoint, they're actually seeing that, well, I've got this choice, or this choice. But the nice thing is the money all goes into Hershend's pocket now.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like
I don't think Herschend really cares whether they're number 3 nationally. I think they're more interested in looking at diversification of portfolio. That would be my guess.
Right. I feel like we're almost saying the same thing. I think I probably just need to clarify. Like, I think we both agree that Disney and Universal are in the class of their own. And in that way, they're almost not in this calculation. Because if you're going to go to Disney and Universal, you're going to go. Like, you're not going to, you're going to make the investment and travel to do those things. And so I think that's what I meant by that, is I meant like the people in those areas, if they're going to plan a vacation, they're going to do it regardless, where they're going to leave and go to a park. But then outside of those, every 5 year, sprints down to those big theme parks, then they're going to be choosing among their local things to do. And Hershend's play then is to make sure that they're always in the consideration for what to do locally.
That they've got something locally to compete with. But that's not what you were talking about with your 3 menu option. A 3 menu option then is, am I going to a Six Flags park? Am I going to a Herschend park? Or am I going to a Merlin park? I mean, that's really what you're talking about if you take Universal and Disney out of the equation.
Well, I think, sure. I still think, though, that you do have families that plan out a once a year or once every 5 year vacation thing. And in that regard, they're probably choosing. I think to your point, if they were going to do that, they would choose between Orlando, California, or Vegas.
I think the consumers of the park the way the parks are consumed by people who aren't local are different.
Yeah. So if you put these into buckets, then basically... what you're saying.
I guess my point is, I just don't think Herschend gives a rat's behind right now as to whether they're number 2 or number 3. They are at the moment, and they're not going to fight it if they get there. I think at the moment they're just looking for diversification. They're looking for diversity of profile or portfolio, and I think they're getting it with this purchase. I think it's a wise move.
Yeah, and I think the point to my numbers earlier was to kind of emphasize that it's still on a numbers basis not nearly as big as Six Flags.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that was $8 billion, and then we're looking at maybe upwards of $1 billion for the acquisition, and at its peak probably upwards of $1 billion, like max $1 billion of total operating revenue for Herschend before this. I also think that is potentially one of the red flags, although we just won't know because it's private. Is like essentially you're doubling the size.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think what we're looking at. Well, and not doubling the size, but you're like, if you're taking on an equal amount of debt, right? If you're taking on like up to $1 billion in debt and you only bring in whatnot, I mean, that's a big move. So who knows how that'll work out from a financial perspective, right. But I do agree though that it's shocking to me how good the quality is. And I think that in this statement, you can see that they're going to attempt to maintain that quality at these acquisitions. Because to your point, I mean, if people were to ask me, in 2018, 2019, I would have said Disney had the best service. But now I would say it's Herschend because their staff, the programs they have for their staff, their commitment to live entertainment, their commitment to training. I mean, they like recruit heavily from entertainment schools, and like getting a job at these parks and live entertainment is like something people aspire to do in the same way that you aspire to go to Broadway. Like and it's crazy. And I think if they expand that ethos, they're going to be highly competitive in those markets.
As far as customer service, as far as training and retention, I mean, they've won awards. Herschend has won awards year after year after year for their training programs, for their recruitment programs, for their retention programs. They are the park with heart, and they have always. Well, not always, but as long as I've been involved, they've had that reputation, Right. So you're right. That's why live entertainers love to work there because they feel respected. But also, if you look at it, things like the parks like Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, they're in areas that don't have a ton of opportunities for people who don't have a lot of high-end training to actually work and become part of a larger company, and they have fostered that, and there's a lot of internal growth in those companies, and that's a Herschend thing. That's their trademark. So the fact that that's the first thing they plan on prioritizing when they roll out into the other parks, as opposed to painting with such a broad brush, it's like now we're going to make them all Six Flags parks or all Herschend parks. Yeah. I guess that's my point. They're trying to play up the diversity of their portfolio, but the unification of their quality and the quality of experience, which I think is a smart move.
Yep. It also, we hinted at this earlier, but this also means a lot, I think, more for Europe, that people are not talking about this at all. But like we said at the beginning, I mean, this is freeing up, this is giving a lot of capital to a place that already has properties in Europe. And again, at the same time, when I'm going to talk about our number 3, right? So you got like Universal UK, Puy du Fou is also coming in, and then you have all the Merlin stuff. I think the Merlin answer was let's cut staff, right? Mm-hmm. And let's try
the Merlin answer was let's save our way into profit. And the Parques Reunidos is much more the let us free up some spending money. Let's get some cash flow going here so that we can invest. So we'll see which one works. I know where I'd put my bet, but we'll see which one works.
Yeah, it is fascinating just to again look at the complete different approaches. We have Six Flags versus Herschend approach, almost entirely different. I mean, even down to the merger, quote unquote merger versus an acquisition. And then, like you said, rolling out like nationwide branding, even the nationwide pass, right? You can go to just really trying to become like, you could go to your local Six Flags in the way you go to your local Publix or Walmart or, whatever. And then they're like, versus a Herschend regional approach or keeping everything the same. And then I think similarly in Europe with this, again, divest to invest versus just fire to save.
Yeah. Again, it's very difficult to save your way into profit. I'm not saying that you should not look at ways to reduce, but anytime I have worked for a company, and this is, and I'm sure, Philip, you'll have some data on this or can find it, but anytime I've worked for a company, anecdotally, when they tried to save their way into profit, it ended up undermining them. It ended up taking away the quality that they had become known for. And in essence, pruning the tree till it dies, as opposed to, well, we're going to lower our expenditure so that we look really good on paper. Usually when companies do that, the first thing they're trying to do is sell, so that they look very profitable on paper, but they're not really looking at the quality or the experience the guests are getting. So, and I'm not suggesting that with Merlin at all, but it's one of those. It just anybody who knows finance, and people who know finance significantly better than I do, who are much smarter about it than I am, will say, if you want to increase your profit, you have to find a balance. You can't save your way into profitability. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out.
I wonder if Southwest is listening.
Don't get me started on that one.
Okay, well, that's not part of the show. Although
I know.
related.
I was about to dive in on another airline too, because I found one that. Anyway, meanwhile,
yeah. So should
we'll
we
get
talk
into that
about
in
Velvet
Unhinged?
Ropes?
We'll get into that in Unhinged.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Should we talk a little bit about Velvet Ropes? You want to talk about Halloween?
Yeah, let's talk about Velvet Ropes.
Okay, yeah. So Velvet Ropes. So also this week we got news out from Disney about two new kind of Velvet Rope lounge experiences they're opening up. The first is Spaceship Earth Lounge, which is the first Disney adults only space within a Disney theme park. The Spaceship Earth Lounge, called Geo 82, will open in 2025 at Epcot, possibly marking the first adults only space in a Disney theme park. Guests must be at least 21 years or older to enter, which will offer a relaxed seating and elevated views of Epcot from the indoor area just located just behind Spaceship Earth. So the 82 in the name signifies 1982, the year Epcot opened, and the lounge will be open sometime later. Reservations are going to be required, but any guest eligible can make those reservations. So essentially, I guess it's just like a new lounge, kind of dining-ish lounge experience that requires reservations but it'll be open to anybody as long as they're in Epcot, right? Versus the DVC lounges, of which they just opened their third. Disney at writ large has opened their third. And the DVC lounges, you have to be a DVC member. Mm-hmm. So the third one that just opened is called McKim's Mile House. It's in the Magic Kingdom. It just opened this past week, and it's exclusively for DVC members, where you can charge your device. You have access to Coca-Cola freestyle machines, Keurigs, armchairs. It's open from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. It can seat roughly 40 guests, and it was opened in Frontierland there. So that is the third
gallery.
one.
If you know Frontierland, it's the old shooting gallery, so that'll tell you kind of where it is.
Yep. It's the old shooting gallery, and it is the third one. They had one open at Disneyland in 2023 in April, and then they had one in Epcot, a DVC lounge, in 2016. So now we got multiple lounges that are Velvet Ropes in different ways, one for age gating and one for member gating, effectively.
And the thing I love about this is it's something that we talk about all the time on the show is let's use your assets to the best of their ability. None of these are building new buildings. These are all reallocating how spaces are being used. Yes, there is cost involved. There is construction involved in making them into these kinds of lounges. But obviously with the Epcot adult space, it's kind of the most high end play date bar I've ever seen in my life, and it makes total sense. It makes total sense in Epcot because you can, first of all, Epcot generally has a slightly older demographic. So putting an adults only in Epcot makes makes perfect sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And secondly, with families, now that they are skewing, they're trying to skew a little bit younger, but with families, you can say, well, we'll meet you all. We'll set up a meeting time and a meeting place, which is what you should do when you travel with your family in any theme park. And just in case everybody gets lost or everybody goes off doing their own thing, and mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle can make a reservation here, go chill out, and then meet up with the family later, and everybody has a great time. Like I said, all of these locations are existing spaces. The Disney Vacation Club Lounge, I think those are just wonderful little perks that have a great deal of perceived value and don't cost a lot to actually implement, which I think is really smart. And I'm not even certain with a capacity of 40 guests how much people are going to even be able to use them. But just knowing that they're there is just another perk for Disney Vacation Club, which is a great way to bring in a bunch of money to the Disney parks. Because for those of you who haven't really looked into the Vacation Club, they pretty much have locations in nearly every resort in Walt Disney World. Certainly everyone built after a certain time period where they started going, oh yeah, we can make money off of this. We can do timeshares in our massive hotels. So again, creating those velvet ropes, cross-utilizing assets, it all makes a ton of sense. And it seems to, obviously with the Disney Vacation Club, seems to be going well for them because they're opening their third. So just another way to dangle that velvet rope in front of somebody. Well, speaking of dangling a velvet rope, we hope that all of you will cross over the velvet rope and join us for Unhinged. But this is the end of this week's Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. On behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, we hope you've enjoyed this week, and we will see you next week.